Hi there, Karen Flaherty here from Living by Human Design. Hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be talking about the gate 32, which is called duration. Okay, so we got the sun in gate 32, which comes off the bottom of the spleen down here. And we've got the earth in gate 42, which is here, which is actually completions, and it comes off the bottom of the sacral. And this week, there's no definition in the chart at all. There are still some planets that are retrograde, including Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And the nodes actually start the week retrograde, but then they go direct on the 17th. And so unless you have some of these gates hooking up with your gates, it should be a fairly quiet week. For example, if you had the 51 in your chart, the gate 51, then you would still, continue from last week having the defined will center, even if you don't usually have the defined will center. That's the way the transits hook up with your own gates. So we got the sun in gate 32, which is called duration or continuity in the original I Ching. It's part of the business circuit, and it is basically the start of the durability, the duration, and the completion of a business. It's all about having a business, running a business, making sure everybody gets paid and all that stuff. It's really the start of the business circuit. And it runs into the 54, which is ambition, and that entire channel is called transformation. And so they describe it as the only thing which endures is change. And so we think of businesses as being, we used to think of businesses as being brick and mortar, right? And, they might be there for 10 or 20 or even 50 years. Now that's not the case, right? Things move and change a lot more quickly than they used to. And so the only thing which endures is change. But it's always about changing up the community and the business of the community and the tribal. It's a very tribal energy. It's bringing people together and creating businesses and basically providing for the entire community, right? In the incarnation crosses this week are the cross of the Maya, conservation, and limitation. And then we've got the gate 42 in the earth, which is called endings. It's also called increase or growth in the original I Ching, but it's basically about completions. It's about finishing things up. It's about getting projects done. And so the way they describe it is the expansion of the resources, which maximizes the development of full potential, right? So it's expanding the resources to get the job done, basically, to complete the project, to get things moving along. And so in the Gene Keys, expectation is the shadow, detachment is the gift, and celebration is the CD. So in the Gene Key 32, we have the three different levels of the Gene Key, as Richard describes them. And he says the shadow is failure, the gift is preservation, and the CD is veneration here. So because this gate, as the gate 32, it does come off the spleen, it has fears associated with it. And you can imagine that the fears associated with business have to do with being the fear of failure or even the fear of success. Basically, those drive us. They drive a lot of us. And whether you have a business or not, you still might feel this fear of failure. And the fear used to be around community, or this, I should say, the energy of this gate, right? Having the businesses, having the resources that provide for the community used to be around community. And now, as Richard says, they're moved toward money. And really the only, it used to be that in community, if you needed food, shelter, or clothing, you could depend on the community, right? The community would have food or a garden or a farmer's market, or there might be a place to stay, or somebody could provide clothing. Any of those things could theoretically, 100 years ago, be provided by the community. You didn't necessarily have to have money, or at least if you didn't have money, you could find comfort somewhere else. Now everything's based on money. It's very difficult to find shelter for the homeless. It's very difficult to find food for children who are in poverty, and it's difficult to find clothing, perhaps, no matter where you are or what the conditions are. And so, in fact, I read an article last week about somebody who was describing being in poverty for most of his childhood, really up until about the age of 20. And he said what we weighed were the pleasures in life. But for him, the pleasures were actually food, clothing, and shelter. And they just didn't have all of them all the time. Sometimes they went without food. Sometimes they went without shelter. A lot of times he went without clothing. And so growing up in that kind of environment, he actually saw those, what most of us think of as very, very basic needs as pleasures. And so if we as a community can help the people who need that to get that and not base it on money, what Richard's saying is that the highest purpose we humans have is to live well. And living well means at least having the food, shelter, and clothing that everyone deserves and needs. He also says true success means no longer being ruled by the concept of success and failure, right? If we're always in this constant changing pattern, whether it has to do with the business or the community or providing for others, what's success, right? Do we need to be labeled as successful? Does that really ring your bells? For some people it does. For some people it's the driving force. For other people it doesn't. The helping people, being there for whether it's clients or customers or patients, whatever role you're playing, being able to provide the services that you want to provide with a passion is a different, perhaps, definition of success, but it's one that I think is getting more airtime, let's say. He also says, as we listen to the great wisdom of our ancestors, of the indigenous tribal cultures, we will once again find our correct inner spirit. So basically, if we, again, taking a more holistic view of success and failure, the business world, of helping people to get food and shelter and clothing as part of the community, if we look to the wisdom of our ancestors, perhaps there's something in there. Following Hurricane Ian last week, I was talking with somebody in a shop, and it turned out that her grandmother was Native American, indigenous, from an indigenous tribe in Florida. And it was just really interesting to talk to her, because she said she wishes they could go back to the way her grandmother told her. They, kind of listened to the land and revered the land and nature and the animals and all of that. It's a different world we live in now, and we're not taking all of that into account as much, and I think we do that at our peril. So we've got a number of personalities this week. I'm not doing a particular profile, but you can imagine if people had the gate 32 in their conscious sun, they would have been generally, well, at least the famous ones, right, were pretty good business people. So it was just interesting to see that there were a few business people on this list, including, his talent was riding motorcycles, but it was still a business, right? So Evel Knievel, Ralph Lauren in the fashion world, Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, Lee Iacocca, who was the president of Ford, and then I think General Motors, or I might have that backwards, where he was very successful and really turned I guess he wound up at Ford because he was behind the Mustang, one of the original Mustangs, or changing things up or something like that. Chuck Berry, Sir Roger Moore, of James Bond fame, Martina Navratilova, Eugene O'Neill, Dwight Eisenhower, William Penn, one of the founders of the country, who I believe was, they named Pennsylvania after him. So I think he was a pretty good politician, businessman, and they had to be politicians, or sorry, they had to be business people in those days as well to be well thought of. Let's say Penny Marshall, who became was an actress and then became a producer and director on her own. So again, business sense, right? Moving from one tier to the next. So those are the people this week. I hope you have a wonderful week. Perhaps there's something will come up in that's business related for you, perhaps community related, perhaps, something to do with the basics, comforts that people need. There are certainly lots of ways to help and lots of ways, that we're hearing about and helping down in Florida here with her after Hurricane Ian. It put quite a dent in the southwest side of Florida, and it'll take many years for those people to recover. And that's just an example of community coming together and helping them with food and shelter and clothing because they have nothing left. So I hope you have a wonderful week, and I will see you soon. Take care.